I want to just ask first, how you and Beth are doing personally?
Oh, we're fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're doing just fine. How about Dean and the kids? How are you guys doing?
Thankfully, everybody's well. What's happening on campus? I mean, you guys adapted really well.
Yeah, we've been fortunate. We had a distance learning program that had been pretty well tried and tested for a number of years, but was never tried and tested for weeks on end. So we had the basis in place. So it was just adding a lot of information to the system, and we've had good luck with it. I think our teachers have done a wonderful job. Right. And missing out on the personal part of education is, at least for a mission-based school, is really hard. So we tried to do what we could there, and we've done the best we can do. But you can't replace people's skills one-on-one, face-to-face. And so it's worked really well. We just got done with a really successful week of giving. We raised about $330,000, and that was including the a live segment that we did, which was really exciting and a lot of fun. I don't know if you had a chance to catch it, but
a little bit.
If you didn't, you can go back on our website. It's there on the website, and we did well. And I think the thing that I learned from it, Melpo, in terms of our industry, is that there's really a place for this. I think that it's never going to replace all of the events and the functions that we have and those kinds of things, but it's tickled people enough that you can raise money. You can raise money virtually like this, but not in it by itself.
Talk about the fact
of a larger system.
Talk about the fact that you had 3 times the virtual attendance.
Yeah, I mean, any typical Starfest, I think our height, since I've been here, is right around 400, 420. Our touches were over 1,000. Now that's including anyone who watched the live performance, anyone who went to the Facebook where you could pick it up live, or made a bid, or won a prize. So we more or less doubled, or more than that, our participation level. And so, we had people bidding on Starfest live auction items from as far away as California that you would never have in that gymnasium. They wouldn't have been there. So, you do get the outreach. You do get a broader band of touches with your clientele and with your constituents.
With the fact that, again, Holy Angels has that reach. Your constituents are all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
Anything specific your committee or your team did to really tap into that network? Because that's very effective.
Well, we were blitzing all over the place. I think, you've got to remember your constituents receive information in a lot of different ways. So, we went back in some ways to the old handwritten letters. I think we sent out over close to 1,000 written pieces to people, and then we did blitzes online. We did email blitzes. We suggested watch parties for people and asked them. We had a lot of different ambassadors who signed up to help us, and they all outreached. So it was it was kind of like putting together a lot of different messages to a lot of different people, but that's the way you got to do it. I actually thought 1,000 or 1,100, what it was okay. I was kind of thinking we could get more because, we've got 10,000 in our database. And so, but not everybody who hasn't been a constituent or been involved is going to, grab online on a Friday night with 70-degree temperatures and watch their high school's fundraising event. But we tickled more people than I was happy with the number that we touched, but I wish it could have been more. And I think if you do this again and the word gets out, and you probably can. But so we had about 10 to 12% of our total population, chimed in.
But as you say, just looking at, I mean, a lot of people in your position are facing the same thing. Galas can't take place in person. What do we do? To realize you can get that kind of a jump and increase the touches by a virtual event is really impressive. What I
Yeah.
love hearing is what you did in advance. You know, we are hearing some of this old school relationship building,
Yeah.
letters,
Yeah.
outreach. Talk to me a little bit about how your team worked together to do that.
Well, what we did is when we knew that we weren't going to be able to have these 4 different functions, which included the golf tournament, an Angie's, which is a what I would call some of our adult women from years ago who attended here, also Starfest itself, and then Rock the Lawn. We said, look, we're not going to be able to do these things, and so we better come up with another idea. So we put together a 90-day plan that included all the different pieces of communication, all the kinds of things that we would need to do with this event that we couldn't do, and put it together in a plan, and we held pretty close to that plan. And I would have to say that without that plan, we would have been rudderless. And it just took the whole advancement team together, and we just locked ourselves at home and virtually online and said, let's bang this out. And we just checked off the boxes as we went along. So I will say this, though. One of the advantages that we had was we're a year out of a capital campaign. So we were able to touch a lot of those people who have been involved and been engaged, and we saw the benefits of the campaign still coming with those later pledges. Now, a lot of people are in year 2 and entering year 3 of their pledges. So that was really helpful too, because we're engaged with those people. And so, you know, one of the things that we always talk about in these campaigns is how you like to see your annual fund grow because of it. And we really witnessed that. We saw that, and we were lucky. We just got done with a campaign, and it was one of the benefits of the campaign. Better luck in a pandemic, I guess.
You know, Tom, you jumped ahead. That was exactly where I was going to go, because I was really wondering about that campaign effect. And I'm so pleased that you saw that, because you did such an effective job, you and your team, during the campaign, really broadening the reach, especially to your alumni network.
Right, and we did. And, you know, it was something we didn't think would be a residual of the campaign until we got into this. And then, you know, we had pledges still coming in. I mean, you know, we had over, well, I don't know, just this year alone, about 1.5 million in pledges that we're going to fund into our annual fund. And so, you know, we didn't, as usual, you don't get all of your pledges, and, you know, people were affected in terms of by the pandemic in their ability to follow up on pledges. But for the most part, you know, they're still coming in. So that revenue stream, in some ways, it's almost paradoxical in that your campaign becomes somewhat of an endowment in a hard time. When you get into something like this, it was there for us.
That's a compelling way to look at it, Tom. And it's interesting. You said capital campaign, and the reality was the campaign was comprehensive. It included that component of the annual fund, which really helped people see the value of not only day-to-day operational sustained giving, capital improvements, and endowment. You really looked at it cohesively and comprehensively. And now you're seeing the fruit of it. Right.
And luckily, knock on wood, you know, our constituency base, while some of our parents have been hit a bit, many of our alumni, especially alumni that have been around for a while, you know, still have the resources available to follow through on their commitments and those kinds of things. So, yeah, we kind of lucked out a little bit, and right place at the right time with the residuals of this campaign.
You know, luck is a funny word, Tom. I think, again, you put the work in initially through the campaign and then got creative with this strategy in the midst of the pandemic to really expand your reach.
I think what we won't know is what happens to donor fatigue when we're all out after them virtually. You know?
I think that we'll probably, take a deep breath and spend a good portion of our time this summer planning. But if the doors open and we can start, getting out and pounding on doors and walking the pavement, we'll be there.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that kind of cacophony of email blasts that people have been receiving and digital requests. You talked about the fact, though, that you really sliced through that with things like handwritten notes. And if I know your team, I'm sure you did some phone calling and you did some other ways to personally engage. And that's all, again, building off of the relationships you all established and the cultivation you did as a result of the campaign.
Right. Well, I think this, and George would know this, and people that have been around development for a long time, has always been, you got to get face to face. You got to get in front of people. Mm-hmm. When you can't get in front of people, you got to go to what the, other industries have done for years, and that's call centers. And, just, figure you're going to make 20 calls a day. And so that's a whole new area for, I think, development people, annual fund people, to think about and receive good, proper training on how you do that too. Because some people are better in face to face than they are on the phone. And you know what, Melpo, you can't see a smile on the phone.
Tom, you're spot on. And it's one of those things. I mean, I remember when we were working on the campaign, you talked about wanting to have those one-on-one, a set number of meetings from your team. Same thing, looking at setting those expectations for outreach on the phone, using Zoom, using the technology that we have to be able to connect. But you're also right about skill set. It does take a difference. And when you look at generations, you and I are of a generation where the phone was what we used. It was an extension of our office. Right. Where younger generations, it's not quite as comfortable.
Right.
Right. Exactly. No, it's there's something, like I said earlier when we started this discussion, there's really something to be learned from this, and I think there's good stories that can come out of institutions about how they dealt with their constituent base during this pandemic, and that's a good story, And so hopefully people will try to cash in on that and tell those good stories because they're powerful. They're powerful.
Tom, that was one of the reasons I wanted to reach out to you, because I knew you had demonstrated that kind of pivot, which we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing a lot of organizations kind of halt and hesitate. We can't ask now, how do we do this? Yet their needs are prevalent.
Right.
And so it's that notion of how do you pivot? How do you adjust?
Mm-hmm.
And really wanted to learn how you did it so effectively. One of the things we've been talking about too in these conversations is leadership. We've seen across the board, nationally, politically, industry-wide, even within families and small institutions, how this has kind of helped shape leaders one way or another. So what have either you discovered for yourself, personally or professionally, or among your team?
Well, I started with the mantra when we went into this that I asked everybody to remain positive and remain flexible. Those two things were going to be most important getting us through. I also, from the get-go, told people I've become a great liar because everything I said yesterday is wrong today with how frequently things are changing. So that's where that flexibility came in. I have found myself just taking more charge and saying, look, nobody knows anything more than I do, and decisions have to be made. And in this case, the way things change so quickly, you don't have as much time for, all the give and take and the collaboration and those kinds of things. So I kind of have found myself, of course, I've been around this business for long enough to probably have a fairly good idea how things are going to go, to be more directive in my leadership. I've just said, no, this is the way we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. And actually, I think people have felt okay with that because, there is a sense of insecurity out there that people have. And so, from my standpoint, I think the schools and the places that have done well have had, leaders who are willing to take the bull by the horns and run with it. This is not a time for the timid right now. And so,
you know, you might tee some people off along the way, but you know, and one of the things that's really been good for me, and you know, Melpo, you and George and your team know this, that in a position like I have, you don't have a lot of companionship in terms of other people. You kind of alone at the top. So we, as the 12 Catholic high schools, we meet now as presidents every week. Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, we're on a Google Hangout call, and we're comparing notes and we're collaborative. And hey, how are you going to handle this? And it's really been helpful. And so, you know, while you spend a lot of your time being as directive as you can, if you've got some people you can lean on in a situation like that, it's really helpful. So, you know, we're always comparing and contrasting, and we're wondering how, you know, how did your fundraising thing come out, all this and that. And, you know, you pick up an idea here or there from your friends, and, you know, you're a little stronger then. But that's been kind of a new byproduct of this whole campaign, or of the whole pandemic for us. And that's the way it's brought, you know, 12 or 13 Catholic high schools together closer in Minneapolis.
That's really interesting, because you would meet what, monthly, quarterly before this?
Quarterly.
Quarterly.
Yeah, quarterly during the year, maybe 5 or 6 times during the year at the most. And, you know, they were perfunctory in nature, mostly. It was, you know, kind of, you know, dress up, put your tie on, go on in and smile and have everybody think you're doing good. Now you're kind of taking off the tie and saying, hey guys, how are you handling this? And it's been pretty cool that way.
So how do you see that progressing forward? Do you see kind of continuing that collaboration as things move into the next year?
So where do I see this thing going down the road? I think barriers were taken down, and I think people are more willing and more apt to trust one another and know that we're all in this thing together. And you know, we're really not enemies. We're all in it for the same reason, the same God, and we've got a good product, and we can help each other.
Again, we're seeing so many of these unexpected gifts coming out of this, but I think it really has to do with having the mindset of being open to it and seeing it and leaning into it. And I'm so pleased to hear that all of you have done that. It's interesting, we're doing some admissions studies and enrollment studies, even during the time of this pandemic. And that question that we're finding is that before, Catholic schools needed to differentiate amongst one another. Now there's really going to be a bigger gap, or do you perceive that in Minneapolis, between who's going to be able to choose Catholic or private versus who's going to go public? And how are you really able to kind of showcase what you talked about just at the beginning of the call, those touch points, those culture pieces that really help define the value of Catholic education and mission-driven
education. You know, and that's so true. You know, all my years tell me that if people could afford a private Catholic education or a private institutional education that's non-public, it'd be like, hey, I'd drive a Cadillac if I could afford it. So with most people, you know, it still boils down to an affordability issue. I mean, that's the bottom line. And that value proposition's got to meet that, you know, that bottom line and what people can afford. And it'll be interesting to see what falls out in this. Our Catholic high schools here are, I think for the most part, I can give you the number, they're looking at anywhere from 3 to 10% decrease in enrollment for next fall. 3 to 10. We built a budget around a 3% decrease, a 7% decrease, and a 10% decrease. Luckily, knock on wood, we're still tracking to hit our number. So, but that's not the case with everybody. And so that's the thing that's, you know, that's going to really challenge schools this summer and into the fall.
What are you seeing? Because you're absolutely right. It's numbers, but then the twin engine is it's fundraising. And what's the financial aid model look like? Are you seeing increased requests, and what are you looking at in terms of your capacity to meet those?
Well, that's a good question. I just came from a meeting talking about that. Our budget for
financial aid is right around $2 million. We're projecting a 20% to 25% increase in financial aid for next year to meet the demands of our parents for the ones that would like to come here and the ones that are here already. And we've already had about 50 appeals on tuition already. Typically in a year like in any other given year, we might be at 15 or 20. So, you know, the effects of what's going on hit close to home there. And so, you know, we don't want students that are here already to consider and have to leave because they can't continue to afford it. And we want to make sure we are affordable for those that want to come. So we're going to be looking at a pretty high increase in tuition assistance this year in our financial aid. And that's got to come from somewhere. And I can't just dump it all back onto, you know, advancement because, you know, I could for a while because of the campaign, but 2 years out from now, and who knows where we'll be, I can't make 4-year commitments when I've got 2 years of what I'll call, you know, some financial surplus to handle it. So it's a big kind of pull and tug that we're going on right here now. But yeah, we're getting the appeals, and most of them are due to being, you know, parents who are either furloughed or they've been laid off, or in some cases actually have just lost their jobs.
You know, it's interesting, Tom, one of the advantages coming off the campaign, one of the things we're seeing is, does this pandemic present an opportunity to go back to people who may have said no before, who now may be really compelled by this increased need that you've just described? And so where they may have been hesitant before, does your advancement team have a strategy to reach out to those that maybe were still on hold or hesitant or even no's before, to talk about this?
Well, we've put a lot of time and effort recently into, you know, gearing up on this annual fund, and with all the activities that we've lost and how we were going to, you know, function, and we've done that now. So we've pivoted to back to our campaign and those commitments. Right now, that's the low-lying fruit for us, and we've got to get back, and we've got to make sure that those people that are in 2- and 3-year commitments, because we're in the second year now, you know, are good for them. And so the dialing for dollars is going to be back to that group right now. You know, we didn't have many people that said no to this campaign. We were pretty fortunate. There were a few. And if they didn't give, it wasn't because they didn't have the wherewithal to give. It's just they didn't have the interest. But yeah, we'll be touching base with some of those people as well. But I would say right now the strategy is to, you know, garner back those relationships on those pledges and make sure we get them in.
That's great. So what's next for you, Tom? You've got, you know, advancement going down one path, admissions going down one path. What are you guys looking at? Maybe a joint virtual in-class model? Are you considering that at all?
Yeah, I would say that there's one thing that we learned in this whole thing is that if you do it well, there is a place for distance learning that tied in with on-site learning can be very compelling and be very well suited to some schools. We'll look at different scheduling strategies, you know, in terms of is the state of Minnesota going to let us have, you know, 620 kids in the building at one time, or is it going to be 200 at a time? Which means we're going to have to look at 3 different schedules. And when they're not here, they need to be virtual. So, you know, we're kind of thinking that it's going to be minimally a combination of what we've learned here over the last 2.5, 3 months and what the future is going to bring. We're actually going to have a meeting set up next week with one of the top distance learning colleges in the country to see if there's a way to team up with them and work as have them mentor us a little bit. And, You know, there's a good college locally here. You probably know who I'm talking about.
I do.
We've got some connections there, and so okay, these guys have been doing this for years. What's the best way to move it forward? You know, we're kind of chugging down the path right now, but you know, how do we enhance it? How do we make it better? How do we offer more opportunities, you know, for our students to who might not be able to be here or might have to be here less or whatever, to offer more opportunities for them. So yeah, we're touching that base right now.
Tom, you know, you always exemplify what the best and brightest are doing. It's that sense that I'm hearing. You pivot, you're looking at creative partnerships, and you're looking at possibilities, and really not leaving any stone unturned in terms of what's next for Holy Angels, which is really great. Any other unexpected gifts, surprises, observations from this time?
I've been surprised at you know, the fact that our teachers are at home working. You would think that they'd be relieved from the stress of supervision and all those kinds of things. My initial thoughts were, well, they can just really concentrate on their teaching at home. I didn't realize how strongly they miss the interaction daily with the kids they teach. I mean, they're really sad. They miss that, and that's what teaching is all about. You know, they got into teaching for kids. If you can't teach kids and you're teaching a computer, it's a whole different ballgame. I didn't realize, Melpo, how strong, you know, that relationship was and is, and what it means in the education piece.
Well, I can tell you as a past parent of Holy Angels graduates that those relationships still exist. Our sons still connect with those teachers, coaches, mentors, because those relationships were established.
Right.
And I would not be surprised that your faculty and staff have found ways creatively to keep that up during this time.
I think they have, you know, they really have. So that's been an interesting, just an eye opener. You know, sometimes you just take things for granted. Certain things taken for granted are more exemplified now as to how important they are. I think we all feel that.
I think that's very true, Tom. You know, you have just been able to demonstrate a lot of keys to the success that you've had and the way you've been able to respond so effectively. Any other advice you'd give peers outside of Minnesota for handling and looking at this?
Well, I think don't get discouraged, you know, and live by my mantras of being positive and being flexible, and just know that, you know, none of us took any classes on how to administrate or how to run a business during a pandemic. So stay flexible, be positive, and we'll get through this. It's going to happen, and we're all going to be better for it when we're done.
That's great. Couldn't have asked for a better ending there, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing some of your success, because it's
well, happy to do so. Well, my success has been helped by your success and your involvement. So, you know, we jumped into this campaign idea together, and while you guys may not be as engaged and involved, we're still reaping the benefits of your work. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. That's the value of our partnership. We want to leave you strengthened. And so the fact that you have seen some real benefit and gain continue, even in the midst of this, is fantastic.
Oh, great. Well, listen, say hi to Dino and the kids, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Take care, Tom. Hi to Beth.
Okay. Bye-bye.